Can you see me? Thank you very much for coming here and making a special evening, for me at least. I would like to thank Nikolai Di Pipa, the director of the program, and I would like, of course, to thank you, Dewi, for a very long Chinese introduction, very typical. I would like to acknowledge two of my colleagues who are tonight here. The Dean of the School of Western Studies at Heilongjiang University, Professor Dr. Yin Tian Chao. Where is he? He's there with the camera, yeah. And he just, yes. He just concluded a lecture at the Hendrix College on shamanism, Chinese shamanism. Very interesting lecture. And Dr., where she is, Song He, also from our university, who is now an exchange faculty professor at Hendrix College. And among other things, she's the editor of the research journal of Heilongjiang University. One more thing so that you all understand exactly where I come from. Heilongjiang is one of the three provinces, northeastern provinces in China. Heilongjiang, Jilin, and Liaoning province. Together with Inner Mongolia, they constituted more than 100 years ago a land called Manchuria, which I'm sure you are much more familiar with Manchuria. Harbin, where I live and where Heilongjiang University is the pearl, the center of Heilongjiang. It's the capital of Heilongjiang, and it's the most strategic town in this Dongbei or northeast China area, with a very fascinating historical experience. It is today a city which serves as a model for scholarly research and study on what is called international city, a true international city, because in 1898, the year that it was established by Tsarist Russia, it drew into it 36 different nations, inhabitants who represented 36 different countries and lived together until it faded out in the 50s and in the 60s. As Ruiz said, my special field is public information, and I practice research and writing methodology at the university. I am not an economist, and anyone here who came expecting to hear some new Chinese formulas, economic formulas, forget it. I am not going to do that because I don't know these things. What I am, however, I believe, is a sensible person with some degree of logic and a very good observant. At least I try to be. And I see what happens. So my first declaration to you today, and that's for the media, is China is not in war with the United States. We are not fighting the United States, but from our perspective, there are those who try to push us around. Not just Americans, but others as well. I believe it comes out of I don't want to use very strong language, but ignorance is the word. Not knowing the culture, not being familiar with the culture, not being familiar with the language which is a special one, and not being familiar with the codes of conduct. And what I'll try to do here tonight is introduce you just a little bit to what we perceive to be our role in the global game of economy, or how and if we should play any game there. Saying that, let me quote to you several lines. When the stock market goes up in the West, the Chinese stock market falls down. When the stock market falls down in the West, the Chinese stock market falls as well. So there is no win-win situation here. It always falls down. This very clever axioma has been put forward by a very clever woman who is my wife, Liang Isha, her name, who is the director of the Foreign Office, she's Chinese, of the Foreign Office of Science and Technology in Heilongjiang. And she is one of the millions and millions of Chinese who look for the stock market, the Chinese stock market today, as the new god. They put their hopes in the stock market. They put their hope in a system that they don't understand, in a game that they don't know what it is and how to play in it, and yet they put all their savings plus their borrowings into this frame only to see their money goes away. The second, I think there are two people here who represent businesses in China, American businesses in China. Is that correct? I don't know. But it is very important for you to know that the Chinese stock market is always in the green. It sounds contradiction to what I said before, isn't it? No, it is not. Because China has its own agenda, its own codes, and its own rules of the game. In China, when stocks are down, it's green. When stocks are up, it's red. No political statement here. I've met many wise foreigners, I mean Westerns in China, who came to visit, and they said that they are, my God, it's always in the green. What is the secret? You know, they don't understand. So let me tell you, when you come to China, when you see something green, wow, run away. It's not good. Well, actually it is, because it goes up. The red is. And then just few days ago, just as I was on my way, there is a very famous television show on China Central TV called Dialogue. It's the flagship program for decoding Chinese policies, politics in many areas, including economics. And Yan Rui, the commentator, the host of this program, came up with this very important line. There are 400 million rich people in China, he said. 100 million rich people in China. You have an expression for such a line, but I would not say it out of respect to you, of course. But it's a wishful thinking. There are much fewer rich people in China, and I don't know where you got your figures, but the number of poor people in China is above 80% of the number of inhabitants. Well, I don't know what extreme poverty is. We don't use this kind of figures. We use like, can a family eat rice or not? Do they have an access to daily living conditions, yes or no? Most, and this is very important thing to know, most of China is rural China. Anyone who comes to visit China and thinks that China is Beijing or Shanghai doesn't understand what goes on there. 83% of the population in China are farmers, villagers who live far away from the cities and are not part of the game. They are not rich. The cities, the new cities in China, you can see the gap. If you take your time from visiting the normal places for tourists and you go to the back streets, you will see the difference. There's a very thin, very thin level of what I call filthy rich in China. These are mostly the corrupted people who made their money on the backs of the others. They were allowed to do it because China, a few years ago, hoped that they will be the catalysts to introducing middle class in China, which is very important for any nation. But they didn't. The gap is growing and there is no middle class in China. Even professors at the university who enjoy prestige and rank and whatever else, their salaries are not salaries of what you may call middle class. And they cannot join that. One more thing I want you to know, and this is extremely important, and I get very angry each time I pick up a new book by a Western who uses figures. There are no numbers in China. And don't believe any number that you read in any publication, whether it's a book or an article in a journal or whatever else, because there is no access to numbers in China. I can tell you that in my capacity as the editor-in-chief of the English news on the central television in Heilongjiang, where every day we get numbers like last month, 60 million people passed through the international airport of Harbin. 60 million. And you ask the person, how did you get it? So they start giving you all kind of figures, whatever, and has it happened that if you happen to pick up somebody at the airport, you were counted, as one who passed through the airport. So it's extremely difficult to estimate anything, including economic markers. And that's my point here. we produce numbers to fit our needs, to cater to our image, to cater to world organizations like the WTO, but we ourselves sometimes, many times, do not know the real number. A very ambitious new project has started half a year ago. It's called the 2011 census in China. I know only one person who was visited by the people who are doing this census. In other words, when the figures will come, I and my family will not be in that census yet, you know. The numbers will tell you, and I'm betting you now, that we still have 1,300,000,000 people in China. But I believe we have 2,500,000,000 people in China, because nobody knows, and there is absolutely no control. If you think that the one-child policy is the Bible, no, there are exceptions. So in the cities, among certain level of population, yes. But in rural China, no way. Families have many. My wife comes from a line of 5 children, not one. And I have many students, especially from villages, who are there, whose families are very large. So this is, in a sense, kind of an introduction to an environment that you really have to understand. And it is very important to me, at least, to make you understand or the Chinese agenda for either being a partner or a bystander in the global economical game. And I maintain that China is not a partner, nor it is a bystander. China has its own agenda. And I think we have the right to have our own agenda and to play a different game than the American game, for example. And all these emissaries who come and leave every day from the State Department and other, trying to push the Chinese to follow a certain line which is parallel to the needs and the wishes of the Americans is wrong. China never told the American administration how to conduct its economy, because China understands that it has no right, it's not its business, not her business to do so. And China takes offense when others, foreigners, la wai, da bise, long noses. That's how foreigners are being described in China. When they come and tell Chinese how to behave and what to do, I think it's rude, it's not proper, and I'm here to defend it. There are many things that we don't understand, or the West do not understand, especially the code language. For example, China is not a communist country. What it is, President Hu and Premier Wen said many times, China practices socialism with Chinese characteristics. Do you know what it means? Do you know what it is? She laughs. It means pure capitalism. That's the code. Pure capitalism. But people do not understand that. On my way to Arkansas, to Little Rock, from New York, I was waiting for my plane in the airport, and I happened to sit near a small, heavy person who was there with his wife and daughter, who is a student in New York University. And he asked me where I come from and what I am, and I say, I'm Chinese, I come from China. Don't look at me this way. And he say, oh, come on, you are not this commie. Commie, you know? Well, he's one of the Americans who do not understand, who was led to believe that China is a threat, that China is like the Soviets, that the Cold War is coming, you know, and maybe it will be even more serious than in the past. I thought, I haven't visited the United States for many, many years, and I thought people made some kind of an advance here, but he disappointed me. The perception of China in the West is totally wrong. Those people who write books about China, about her economy, about her history, do not understand China, do not understand her culture and tradition. You cannot understand because it's very, very complicated. I, as one who have lived in China for so many years, still did not scrape the tip of the ice, and I live only among Chinese, not among foreigners, with a Chinese, pure Chinese family. And I still don't understand many things. It takes thousands of years to understand the complexity of what is called the Chinese mind, the Chinese culture and tradition. And one should be very humble and very modest when it comes to analyze something, when what he does actually, he puts his values, his culture and understanding of his culture into another culture and says, well, this is right or wrong according to his values and judgments. And that's what brings conflicts. I said China is a capitalist state, and it is. And when I say capitalist state, I mean by tradition, by culture. Chinese were excellent merchants in general, and they practiced it for thousands of years. So what has changed? Nothing. Except that today, in terms of political environment, the government or the state owns most of the things, but it owns it and it maneuvers it and it deals with it today as a, you know, with the understanding of capitalism. What they did in the past, during Mao Zedong's days and a little bit later, was taking the Soviet model, and this failed. There are still some remnants of that. State-owned enterprises managed in the Soviet way, but this is changing. They have recognized that it should be changed in order to go up and succeed in something. So, it is capitalism in maybe even in a utopian, as a utopian ideal. The state is capitalist, but most individuals are not. And there's a conflict here. And today, I want to take one sector as a case study. And since I don't have much time, I would not be able to develop it fully. But let's take a new area, relatively new area, of what we call e-commerce. E-commerce, where in the West, many businesses deal daily in their business through the internet. They have the platforms, they have highly sophisticated software and understanding of what has to be done, and it has also the support and the infrastructure, both banking support and others by the state. But in China, it's different. I personally believe, and I would be very happy to hear another opinion, but I believe that the economic strength of a country does not lie within the hands of the multinational companies or the conglomerates. I believe that the strength, economic strength of a nation lies within the small and medium-sized businesses. They are the engine, the economic engines that moves a country. They are the suppliers. They are the builders. They are the catalyzers. Because the multinationals, the conglomerates, don't care. They care about one thing, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as they know where it goes to. But small and medium businesses, that's a big difference. In the West, the government not only supported, but gave the opportunity for an infrastructure. In the West, business people understand the importance of being able to reach outside of your community, outside of your country, when you have goods to exchange or to sell. In China, the situation is different. There is no infrastructure. The internet is excellent to a level in the cities. But outside, in rural China, where most of the businesses are, there is no infrastructure. Very basic internet service and little understanding, if at all, by the business community as to the importance of building platforms and using infrastructure to benefit themselves. If I had a computer here, I will go into the internet and I'll show you an example. A company, middle-sized company, which is big in a sense, manufacturing machinery, advanced machinery, wants to reach the European and the American market. They've hired a former student of mine who is very well versed in English and understand also some of the Western cultures. But she has absolutely no knowledge of internet or economics. What did she do? They think that she is the expert and she is their savior. So she signed up for Skype. You know Skype? And she has now a site on Skype. Instead of putting her picture on Skype, she put one of the machines that she's trying to sell. And this is her platform to reach other partners, let's say, potential partners. It's almost a joke. But it illustrates the very low level of knowledge of the Chinese businesses, which are not supported by the government, and this is also a problem in the misunderstanding of the Chinese government in terms of what is important. Let me say to you one more thing before I go into conclusion. Chinese mentality, Chinese culture calls for everything to be big, everything to be large. You have a stadium in Beijing called the Bird's Nest. It's the largest in the world. Building it, constructing it, created shortage of steel, global shortage of steel. No government in the world will pour so much steel and so much money into a project that will be a white elephant later. CCTV building, this enormous, huge structure, new structure in the middle of Harbin, shaped like this, was built to a tune of maybe $1 trillion. Nobody knows how much. For what? The Olympic Games. Everything that I mentioned is big and should be big because this is the Chinese way. So this leads thinkers to think always about the large, the big, and leave alone the small or the medium size. So the Chinese government has put an emphasis on creating a better environment for multinationals to come to China and invest. Multinationals came to China, but investments, tangible investments, I didn't see. I always said in my articles that multinationals do not care about China or anybody else, they care about themselves. And when the time is right, they either made profit or they cannot make profit, they will leave. And that's what's happening. Labor cost has been rising in China, so they're looking for new places like Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines is too expensive already. And they abandoned China. To sum up, I will try to cite to you several areas that have to be improved. And you can, although it has to do with the e-commerce, yet you can take it also and translate it into other areas. And any one of you who would like to either participate in the economic game with China or understand it, take these 7 areas to your considerations when you analyze something. The first one is education. There is no question that education is the basis for everything. And better skilled personnel are needed for the development of e-commerce, the development of policies and regulations that relate to, for example, online transactions. Right now, we don't have it. 2, the development of e-commerce for services and the capacity of supporting these services. This does not exist. The area, the service, the word service, the area of service in China is lacking. There are attempts today to establish a concept of service in businesses, but it will take a long time because it costs money, and businesses, I'm talking now about Chinese businesses, do not want to spend that money. They don't think it is important. Chinese consumerism almost does not exist. Again, it has to do with Chinese mentality, culture. You do not question anything. You either say it's none of my business and you don't play the game, or, you know, if somebody sold you something bad, you don't go back and return it. No way. You suffer the consequences. So changing this trend is extremely difficult. But the government is trying and is pouring money into that. It will take some time. 3, the integration of information and communication technologies for trade and transport facilities, for the expanding of market opportunities. That means also, going back to education, educating not just personnel, supporting personnel, but educating the business community itself as to what the opportunities are and what they should do. They don't know. Here it's a big, big problem. The traditional Chinese business is run by families, or let's say, I call it grocery store. It can be a medium-sized business, it doesn't matter. The mentality is a grocery store mentality, and it's very difficult at this time to move people from one position to another. I can say the government is trying to do something and has allocated budgets, but it's not like in America or in the West, where if you have a need, you're going to look for it. And voluntarily, you will push yourself. Chinese are very passive in that sense. And if I don't create something and do it for somebody, he or she will not do it. And that's a big problem. And those of you who may go to China to find some partners or whatever, be aware of that. Your cooperation should be understood by both sides fully in order for that venture to work. Banking services. They are not very developed in China. Multinationals use the services of banks in the West and banks in China and are not afraid of the costs. But the general public or the business community, which is under the multinationals, the cost there is so enormous that they will not do it. In other words, for example, money exchange. The service cost is enormous. And Chinese businessmen will not voluntarily go and pay that cost. 2, the banks are not as sophisticated yet as the banks in the West. And everything is like in the Soviet era in terms of services. Long lines, a lot of costs, many documents to be shown, to be produced in order to get something, an endless thing, and suitcases. me share with you something. I bought an apartment. I couldn't pay with a check or money order. My wife brought her driver and several of the office people who surrounded me while I was walking to the management of that building from the bank to the building with a suitcase full of cash. Oh, it was scary. And it took them 3 days to count. This is not criticism. This is reality. This is reality. And you have to know that. Banks are part of the government. Being part of the government, they don't think public should deserve a better service, because there is a different definition for what public is in China. And it's not since 1949. It's not. It's traditional way. It's a cultural way, thousands of years. And remember that China, or the Chinese, have lived under the rules of the emperors for thousands of years. And it doesn't matter what name it is. Now we are in the Hu dynasty. And they know how to function within those dynasties. They don't know how to function in your way, because they have their way. So, what Chinese businesses should know is how to deal with the new technology and understand global economies. Understand, so that they can deal with. There is an attempt to do that, but it's on a small scale. And finally, and one of the most important things is language. Some time ago, somebody said to me, I don't understand why the internet language is English. We have more people than in America and Britain together. Why shouldn't the internet language be Chinese? He was right, wasn't he? But not practical. Not many people in China speak other languages. And therefore, and I'm sorry to say that, and I'm a big critic of that, including in the universities, scientists, they speak Chinese. They don't know how to communicate with others. Well, if you have a deficiency in language skill, how can you conduct business? And if you take a trip in China with a car, not with a plane, you will see many white elephants, huge buildings that were built on the premise of having a cooperation between a Chinese and a foreign company, but it failed. 99% of the time it fails because of misunderstandings that lie in not being able to speak common international language and not understanding the culture on both sides. These are the barriers. Therefore, don't be afraid. China will not conquer the world. China has acted for 4,000 years as a passive player, usually guarding its own. China has not opened yet to the world, although many people say the opening up policy and whatever doesn't exist. China opened only what it needs to be open. And usually It's for technology and know-how from the outside, and that's very good, but you should know that. China does not give China tax for its own purposes and its own good, but not for building itself up as a superpower militarily. No. China has to deal with everyday realities. And everyday realities is having rice for 2 billion people. Because without rice, oh God, who knows what will happen. And to produce rice and other commodities like grain commodities like corn and whatever that can feed a nation is very difficult. And for that it needs technology. And she's looking in every source and every way to get that technology, to buy or to share that technology. It does not produce what we call cultural imperialism, where it goes out to tell you that you should believe in her system or whatever. This, we believe, is not our business. Everybody to his own. So, China's growth is extremely important to the Chinese. It is also very important to Westerners who believe that if China grows, it's going to threaten their existence. Well, I'm not a government official. I'm a very simple professor. But let me tell you, just looking at the record, the Chinese record of at least 4,000 years, we never had any ambition to conquer the world. As a matter of fact, the huge monument that the Chinese nation has built, the Chinese Great Wall, was a defensive wall. And that wall still exists today in the mentality, in the culture, and in the practice. Don't come on us too strong without being invited. We need you. We need your cooperation. We need your technology, your know-how. You have had the experience and you have developed it. Let's be partners in peaceful way. Thank you.
We do have time for a couple of questions. If you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. My question is to do with the relationship of China to India. How does China view India, given the background of aggression, Chinese aggression towards India?
Okay, that's a different area to consider its politics, but it's a very good a question and an example. In 2005, China signed a strategic treaty agreement with Russia and India. India, as a matter of fact, is a larger threat to China than America. Because India, in a sense, is also a developing country that has huge population and many, many needs, and these two countries share a border together. Nevertheless, the Chinese understand and understood that alliances, cooperation between Asiatic countries can balance the alliances and partnerships of Western countries, like the European Union, the American involvement, and so on. So they do have strategic cooperation with India. However, they're very careful about it. And there were disagreements in the past 4 years, many, many disagreements, but both sides were clever enough to realize what is tangible, what is real, and what can be put aside, and are working together. And if India, for example, would like to become the outsourcing center of the world, that's okay with China. China does not compete with them on that. And China gives its knowledge to India, while India shares its knowledge with China. So on the whole, relationships have improved dramatically, and even the border dispute between the two countries, they have decided to put it aside for several years, not to deal with it now, because now they have more pressing needs, and it comes as a sign, you know, that there is a peaceful cooperation here, not hostile cooperation. So in very few words, that's China respects and cherishes the Indian know-how and cooperates with it, as you know.
Yes, ma'am. Right behind you.
First of all, thank you for coming to Little Rock to share your perspective with us. My question is about the housing market.
The housing market,
Despite the news that the interest rates were raised and banks, people are having a harder time getting loans from banks, I'm not sure the government will be able to cool off the housing market. What do you think?
You're absolutely sure, because the government is the cause of this bubble. How? Well, in China, government is everything, as you know. And the property, the land, belongs to the government. Now, you have a contractor or a builder or a construction company who would like to purchase this land. The government wants to make profit. So it raises the prices to a ridiculous sum of money. And I can tell you personally, I was involved in such a seminar, I can call it, when a foreign investor in the real estate sector came, and I was asked to kind of be the middleman or something, and I learned a great deal about how they move people out of an area, they level the area, didn't cost them much, and then they want to sell it for $10 billion. So obviously, you know, the contractor, he's there to make a profit. How can he make a profit? He has to put prices up. That's one problem. There are many other problems. There is an area in southern China, Guangzhou, where people there have a long tradition of business. These people, when they reach the age of 15, they are thrown out of their houses and sent to the world to learn and experience how to build business by themselves. And all of them are fantastic business people. What they do is they converge, they come into one area and they buy everything there. Sometimes they hold it for a little while, and then they put it into the market with ridiculous prices. This is one other problem that we have. Third, it's a human nature that when you have an opportunity, you try to grab it. I said that Jan Rue said that there were 4 million rich people in China. Well, everybody wants to be rich. Or at least everybody wants to use an opportunity at least to have something. And people rush to buy houses. So there is, you know, if there are many people who wants to buy a house and there's only one house, so of course the price will go up. Now, how do they do it? It's fantastic. That's Chinese way. The banks give you loans. It is so easy to get a loan in China, it doesn't matter how much you want. You don't have to bring anything. Just a short statement, sign, bring somebody from your family who will sign with you, and you got 500 million yuan. Not exactly, but, you know. And the default problem in China is huge. Just 2 years ago, the central government ordered all the banks to erase all the default, you know, just like that. And it happens again. Why? There is a political reason for that. You want everybody to be very happy. So, and another thing, the structure of the Chinese family or the interaction between people within the family. It's not like in the West. If I need money, every member of the family will bring as much as he or she can. So, my wife was very fortunate to be married to a Western with a long nose who is conceived to be very rich, like a billionaire, because he was able to buy an apartment in the best section of Harbin. So now every member of the family wants to reach that level. And they borrow money and they buy apartments close to our place. If they have done it here, they will be slaves to that bank for the rest of their life. And also, I'm sure, the apartment will be taken away from them because they would not be able to pay the mortgage. They got mortgage for 20 years. They pay all of their salary for that. When they're going to return the money that I gave them, I don't know. So, but they feel secure now. They have property. And they don't have money to buy food because all the money that they make, one makes 2,000 yuan a month and the other one 2,600. So altogether they have 4,600 yuan per month, and 3,800 yuan out of that goes to the bank. They are rich. Oh yeah, they have an apartment. Well, I keep telling them that that apartment does not belong to them at least for the next 20 years. All the measures that the Chinese government have introduced do not work. Do not work because every bank, although there is a directive from the central government, every bank does what it wants to do. There is no control of that. So prices going up, and prices will go up as long as there is need. And in China, there is always a need for new place to live because the population expands, like, especially in the cities also, where you have migrant workers moving all the time.
We have time for one more. Are there? It's coming.
Very informative lecture. The question I have is that, is it true that China is the second largest economy in the world and is poised to become first largest in 15 years?
Thank you very much for this question. No.
Well, thank you for coming.
China is in a
Joking.
China's economy is based on a very dangerous one level of thing, and that is exports. China has no consumerism. Everything that is produced in China goes out of China, does not go to the Chinese consumers. Look, I can give you an example of the game. It's a very interesting thing. You know, China holds the Americans by the throats. You know that. China is the largest holder of American bonds in the world. It's in the trillions of dollars. And if China decides to get rid of that, America will sink. The crisis, the economic crisis that we witnessed 2 years ago will be nothing. The American government knows that. Didn't you think for a moment, did you ever think for a moment why is it that in public addresses people talk about the disparity, no parallel? In other words, we get a lot of imports from China, but we cannot export to China. That's an interesting question. A country that depends totally on exports is not a strong economy. As a matter of fact, and that's to the poverty, the largest, or the businesses that make all these things are not real businesses, they are villages. Each village, especially in the south of China, specializes in producing something else. Some baby clothes, some toys, some shoes, some necklaces, all kind of things like that. And it's a village business. They don't have the capacity of exporting anything. They depend on middlemen to come and buy their goods and then ship. What they get for one product is let's say 1 cent, while the middleman makes $50, and when you go to the store, they sell it for $2,000, you know? So how can that villager be rich? But they produce a lot and they flood the markets. Mark my words, the Chinese are not stupid. Anybody who thinks this way, well, look at your country. Who built the beautiful system of railways in America? The Chinese. Yes. Chinese know how to play the game, and they ensured themselves that the United States would not take very harsh measures. And as we do see, the United States did not take harsh measures because China holds the American future economy in its hands, only as a security, with peaceful hands. Okay? So it is not the second largest. I don't know, by the way, who is the first. I don't think there is a nation on earth who is the first economy. I think we have moved into a new area of multinationals, of corporations. There are the new nations in this world. China, Lenovo bought IBM not because it was a good business. Lenovo is a government-owned company. No company in the world could have paid so much money to acquire that part of IBM. Do you know why Lenovo bought IBM? Just for image purposes. And that's very smart. One more reminder. Do you remember the big protests all over the world against the Beijing Olympics? About human rights, about this and that and whatever, and the French president said that he's not coming, and even Bush stuttered. Typical, right? And then something happened. What changed it all? Why everybody came to the Beijing Olympics? Because of love of China? No. This illustration to show you how clever the Chinese are. There was an earthquake in Sichuan, 7.3. Thousands and thousands of people died. And overnight, the sentiments have changed. I must remind you that there was a devastating earthquake 20 years earlier in Chongqing, where close to 300,000 people perished. Nobody cared. But the Chinese government handled the crisis very nicely, very cleverly, and you all went there to the Olympics to celebrate China. We don't have another...
No, sir.
Okay, so I'll just one
Sure.
sentence in closing. We believe in respect. We believe in peace. We believe in peaceful coexistence. We are not competing, I believe, with anybody. If there is a competition in China, it is a competition among ourselves to be better. Not to be better than you are, but to be better so that we live together on one globe, you know, in not just peaceful, but comfort. That's part of the Chinese philosophy, and it has been part of the Chinese philosophy for thousands of years. And it does not change when we talk about economies. Thank you very much.